University, I would like to express my deepest appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Apisit Wechanchiwa and His Excellency Dr. Mahathir Bin Mohamad for making this session reality. Let me begin the sessions by introducing our first speaker is here, Mr. Apisit Wechanchiwa, the opposition leaders of Thai Parliament and the Democrat leaders. Mr. Apisit Wechanchiwa began his political career at age 27 in the year 1992 election that followed the coup, becoming an only Bangkok member of parliament for the Democrat Party. He was re-elected to the same seat in 1995 and 1996 general elections. He has served as Democrat Party spokesman, government spokesman, Deputy Secretary to the Prime Minister for Political Affairs, Chairman of House of Education and Affairs Committees, and the Minister to the Prime Minister's Office. In year 2005, he was promoted to Democrat Party leaders. At age 44, he was the country's youngest Prime Minister in more than 60 years. As Prime Minister, he promoted a people agenda using the campaign slogan, "Putting People First," which focused primarily on policies affecting the living conditions of Thailand's rural and working class citizens. Please welcome Mr. Apisit to the stage.
Excellency, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Mahathir Bin Mohamad, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me first of all to congratulate Prince of Songkhla University for holding this international conference on political science, public administration and peace studies with the theme of civil society, politics and development in ASEAN countries. I say so and do so because I think this is very much a topical and relevant issue facing all of us here in ASEAN, and of course will have profound impact not just on the region but also in Asia, Asia Pacific, or even has some global implications. And I'm pleased to learn that the first day of the conference had seen a number of issues already being addressed, both domestic issues here in Thailand and also regional issues in ASEAN, with a number of suggestions, ideas, and proposals. Let me begin by reaffirming that for any political leader, his or her goal should always be peace and prosperity. Two goals that usually go together, but not always so, and that these goals are shared not just at the national level, but also at regional and international levels. Indeed, for ASEAN, as we work towards establishing the ASEAN community in a couple of years, it is clear that this community will be based or built upon three pillars, which cover economic, political and security dimensions, as well as social and cultural dimensions, and that such a community would not be complete without one of these three pillars. And yet, while it is clear that peace and prosperity are the shared goals of political leaders at all levels, we continue to see a number of problems in terms of conflicts that persist. And the ASEAN region is no exception, nor Thailand, also as a member of ASEAN, is an exception. And that the issue of conflicts, be they at the national level or domestic level, or be they at the regional level, continue to provide cause for concern. A case in point now, when we talk about the building of the ASEAN community, which we all want to achieve within 2 to 3 years' time, there appears now to be less concern about whether individual members can keep their commitments as far as economic, trade, investment, and agreements are concerned. But now the building of the community faces a threat from the failure of member countries to reach a resolution on the issues such as the South China Seas. Most recently, the failure even to reach an agreement to have a declaration on the conduct of parties in the South China Seas. And as we continue to build this community, we also continue to see border conflicts, violent movements in a number of member countries, and also, of course, political polarization in a number of member countries as well. And the starting point, at trying to grips with these problems, we really have to go to the root causes of such conflicts. I remember 2 decades ago, a period that you might call the dawn of globalization, as it is dubbed today. There was a kind of false promise that somehow with advance of technology, particularly communications, in the area of communications, the world would become increasingly borderless, and that we can all share prosperity and perhaps even attain common values, therefore making it easier to attain the goals of both prosperity and peace. Well, 20 years on, it hasn't materialized. On the contrary, despite the increasingly borderless nature of the world, despite the fact that there is greater interdependency and shared information, we see a number of conflicts all over the world. Many of the traditional type arising from ethnic, nationalistic, religious, and other such conflicts. And we also see rising tensions in a number of countries, including those that see themselves as democracies. We also see clearly that despite the trend of globalization at the global levels and also at a number of regional levels, we simply do not have the kind of mechanism or institution that can deal with these problems in an effective manner. Witness what is now going on in Syria and the struggle that the international community or the United Nations has in trying to find a way of bringing peace to the country. In ASEAN, despite the new charter, despite provisions about dispute settlement mechanisms, and also a number of innovative ideas, the ASEAN Troika, the ASEAN UN Dialogue Conference, and so on, there is no institutionalized framework as such that will be able to deal with all kinds of conflicts that still exist within the region. So we really have to look at a number of conflicts and look at the fundamental causes. There can be no arguing that conflicts arise from differences. And the fact of the matter is, we will continue to live in a world where there is diversity. which in itself should not be seen as a problem. Indeed, for many of us, myself included, I think diversity is something that should be celebrated. Imagine what the world, what a country, what a society would be like if we were all homogeneous without any kind of diversity at all. So the challenge is not to somehow erase diversity or differences, but the challenge is how we can live together with existing differences and diversity. And these differences or diversity will have or will originate from different conditions according to the location and period of that particular society or country. There could be issues about national conflicts, international conflicts, there could be ethnic, religious differences, there could be just differences of ideologies or political thoughts. I will reiterate once again, the challenge for us is not to erase these differences, but somehow find a means by which people with differences can live together in a peaceful environment. And of course, we see differences and diversity all the time. And usually that does not give rise to conflicts. Usually that's because we have some shared values, some common goals, some common purposes that keep us together and therefore can override whatever differences or diversity there may be. And it's worth keeping that in mind, because in the end you will find that for a particular instance of conflict, it might require specific solutions. And there is no ready-made solution or formula that can apply to all situations, nor even a formula for a mechanism for a process that will overcome these problems. But in my talks with a number of people who have worked on peace processes, on conflict resolution, they agree on one thing. While there is no common solution, usually there are common mistakes that are made in dealing with the situation. And usually there are common factors that give rise to the conflicts in the first place. And it begins with the fact that differences or diversity turn into distrust, and then to conflicts, and then to abuse. And it gets exacerbated when the rule of law breaks down, or when there is injustice, or at least perceived injustice, felt by the parties to the conflicts or by one group or another. And once that happens, we're thrown off balance. And then it leads to further polarization, it leads to alienation, and then it leads to violence. And then the violence has to be dealt with by states, by governments, which will find it necessary to respond with measures, security measures, and sometimes the use of force, which in itself can then feed into a new cycle of conflicts. That's the kind of pattern that we see almost everywhere when there are these instances of conflicts that need resolution. And just to give you a couple of examples, here in Thailand, which I think are cases that are very much on the minds of participants here, the political conflict that continues here in this country in recent times, and also, of course, the situation here in the southern provinces. It follows this kind of pattern. The political conflict, we have had a maturing democracy in progress, but we have differences in interests, we have had political competition. but the situation became a true crisis. The tipping point for that was when the rule of law began to break down. For the current political conflict, that can be traced back to the ruling of the Constitutional Court in the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawat's case back in 2001. And then the subsequent abuses of power, which led to a strong reaction, the shutting down of space or areas for people who think differently, which led to street politics, which then led to a coup d'etat, in itself creating new conditions for reactions from a different group that then had to take to the streets. And then there is distrust, and then there is abuse, and then both sides feel that there had been injustice. And to make things worse, the polarization was made easier by the fact that there are now community radios, satellite televisions, which very much act as partisan media or almost propaganda machines. And then when the situation gets out of hand, the government or the state has to deal with the protests on the streets, with demonstrations, losses result, which aggravate this situation even further.
So the pattern that I just outlined is very much followed in this instance in the case of the political conflict that we see today. The problems in the Deep South may be somewhat different, and it has a long root in history with ethnic, cultural, religious, and other dimensions being in play. But then again, as recently as the year 2000, we found that the situation had been largely resolved, as borne out by the fact that in that year there were less than 10 incidents of violence, and that there had been successive governments that worked towards resolution and trying to find balance in the area where people of diverse natures could live side by side. But that was thrown off balance by a change in policy, whereby there was violence and abuse used by the state more clearly. Again, basically a breakdown of the rule of law and the creation of injustice and grievances. And then as the situation got worse, you had more responses from the state in terms of maybe hardline policies being pursued, particularly from the year 2005 on, and the violence has escalated. Again, the outline of the events here follows the pattern that I suggested at the outset. So how do we approach, how do we deal when these situations arise and are exacerbated? It is clear that the use of force or security measures, while necessary in some situations, cannot provide any kind of lasting solution. And if not used carefully, it will actually become part of the problem. In the end, solutions that are required will have to be political in nature. There has to be political leadership, political will, political process where parties to the conflicts and others are brought together to find a solution that is accepted politically by all sides. The process by which we reach that solution in itself is also important. Sometimes the process itself can be a bigger challenge than identifying the solutions at the end of the process. And this is where I think all participants here representing the various sections of society have a very active role to play. For instance, as far as the political conflict that I mentioned here in Thailand is concerned, the way to move forward has to begin with fact-finding and getting at the truth, which is why the previous government appointed an independent commission on truth and reconciliation. And we hope that their work, which will be reported to the government anytime now, will be a basic starting point for any kind of reconciliation plans. There is first need to establish what exactly happened so that we all have a common understanding of what really took place. And then, using that as a reference point, we can make progress in terms of compensation, in terms of due process of law, and, if necessary, some kind of amnesty proposal. But even as we go through this process, we still need to address the root cause of the problem, which goes back to how we can create a culture of tolerance, a culture that is in line with democratic values that will allow people to live together peacefully despite their political ideologies or differences. For the South, the previous government also changed direction of policy. We put at the forefront development and justice as priorities to try to reach a solution. Development doesn't mean centrally directed or directed from Bangkok, but also an attempt to identify development needs from individual communities in the 3 provinces and the 4 districts in Songkhla, with clear targets about how we would raise the average income of this region so that they would be in line with the average income of people in other parts of the country. We began a process where there has to be greater accountability as far as the use of state power is concerned. And in the cases of the 4 districts in Songkhla, we actually removed martial law from the 4 districts and actually began lifting the state of emergency in 1 district in Pattani. And while we were doing that, we were in the process of opening up political space for all sides. The new law on administrating the southern region has a special advisory council where leaders, religious leaders, community leaders, local leaders would be represented on that council. Be active in the policy formulating process as far as administering and developing the region is concerned. And officials were beginning to be engaged in a series of talks or dialogue with people who think differently. But all these have to go together because you have to go through a period of trust building, identifying the demands, identifying the needs, identifying who would be representing whom in the whole area. And there is need to identify that whatever political solution down the line, it has to retain that balance that will allow diversity to continue with protection of rights for all groups, irrespective of their ethnic or religious belongings. That's the kind of direction that we had proposed. And we hope that the current government will see the rationale and the benefits of such an approach. And as we speak, and we see rising tensions in both problems that I've mentioned as far as Thailand is concerned, I think that is partly due to the fact that there is still a lack of clarity and direction or commitment that such an approach would be continued. I'd now like to just mention the issue of conflict resolution at the regional level also. With greater interdependency, we have to recognize that as we build a community here in ASEAN, whatever going on in one country will clearly have an effect on other members. And therefore, even in what is strictly a domestic issue, it would still make sense to seek cooperation or perhaps to engage others in the region in finding solutions. And as with all problems of conflicts, at times it is useful to have third party, to have outside mechanisms that can actually provide certain services. This could range from facilitation, mediation, if there are such requests put in, if we continue to stick to the principles of non-interference. And we have seen that worked in a number of instances in ASEAN history. Indeed, we see that in East Timor, with the voluntary acceptance of Indonesia to allow other countries in ASEAN to contribute, Thailand, as well as other ASEAN countries, played an important role in finding a solution and peace building in East Timor. But we don't have to confine ourselves just to ASEAN countries or ASEAN nations. We see, for instance, that in encouraging change in Myanmar, which is now taking place at a much more rapid pace than people have anticipated, throughout the years, we have had to use the good offices of the United Nations, working in tandem with ASEAN countries that have the trust of the government in Myanmar. We see in the Philippines the role played by OIC, played by the government of Malaysia also in helping with the peace process. The point here is that often it does help to have cooperation and to use the services of others outside the conflict or the conflict area. But let me also warn that if there are going to be participation from third parties or from outside parties, it has to be done in a manner that recognizes the sensitivity of the issue. And it is not enough to have the goodwill to assist, but can somehow upset the balance of whatever process is taking place. So the key here is really flexibility. To take each situation, look at the merits, the cases, and see whatever form that would be appropriate to find or to help build the solution to such a problem. And that's the advantage that ASEAN has, because ASEAN, throughout its more than 40 years of existence, have always been pragmatic, have always been flexible in the way that it approaches problems with such sensitivity. Just that, with greater interdependency, with more integration, we need to be more institutionalized in our approaches to these problems. And there are a number of options that are open to us. ASEAN now has the Human Rights Commission. It has a dispute settlement mechanism. It often appoints an ASEAN Troika. And it also works with a number of other international organizations. And for issues ranging from the South China Seas, border conflicts, even domestic issues, we can often make good use of what is available to us in ASEAN. So let me end by once again saying that I am confident that all of us here would like to see an end to all conflicts all over the world. But we should be realistic enough to know that conflicts would likely happen so long as there is diversity and differences in the world. But that, as I say, our goal is somehow to build a society, a community, or a country where people learn to live with differences and diversity. And to achieve that, we need to work together. Government, NGOs, business, media, in building the right environment where those values can be created or established. Democratic values and cultures of non-violence, tolerance, recognition and respect for the rights of others will in the end be the strongest foundation for any peace-building process or peacekeeping process, and to ensure that there will be peace or peaceful environment in the world that we live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As far as the time is concerned, I'd like to apologize that we can only entertain very few questions for His Excellency on the stage. Any questions? Can you please identify yourselves as well? Please. อาจารย์ชันธนา please. Microphone.
My name is Chantana from Chulalongkorn University. I appreciate your talk very much, but I believe that people.
Please, can you speak up a little?
Sorry. I'm Chantana from Chulalongkorn University.
Thank you.
I appreciate your talk very much, but I think that a lot of people would like to hear you as the person who have gone through violence and political confrontation in the so-called yellow and red shirt. What are lessons learned when you've gone through this violence, good and bad? What are mistakes that you have picked up, as well as achievement, in your opinion, from the both sides, from the government as well as those anti-government during that period? Thank you very much.
Yeah. You know, we're still quite some way of reaching a solution or achieving reconciliation. And I think the most important factor or lesson is this. The conflicts continue because we could not even establish some sets of truth that all sides can share. There is no way that you can achieve any kind of reconciliation if two groups or more groups of people have completely different beliefs as to what happened, as to what is going on. They are living in different worlds. That's the most important bridge that you need to build in terms of acceptance of some common truth, which I'm sure you will all suspect is somewhere between what the two sides are now believing. Unless the two sides to the conflicts are willing to see that they don't see the whole truth from their perspective, it will be extremely difficult to make progress in terms of reconciliation. The second thing is that we don't try hard enough in our society to make people see both sides of the story. Even if we cannot establish a single truth, at least we should try to bring the parties to the conflict to see why the people who see things differently do so. If we don't try at all to make this kind of connection, then reconciliation cannot be achieved. What I find as the most perhaps frustrating lesson during my time was that despite my attempt to reach out to make compromises, I was constantly frustrated by the fact that I did not have access or channels of communications to try to reach some kind of common understanding with people who disagree with me. I've had so many instances and experience of talking maybe to some people who are sympathetic to the red shirts, begin to make some headway, but maybe after a week after that, after they go back and watch a certain television channel, all the things that we talk about trying to create some kind of understanding is completely erased by just what I would see as partisan information or worse, propaganda. And that's the most difficult thing to overcome, because unless you can exchange ideas openly, unless you can begin to accept the reasoning and facts from the other side, it is very difficult to achieve reconciliation, despite all the attempts, despite all the political will that you have.
Any more questions?
And I should say that logic applies to the situation in the South also.
Yes.
The people outside the three provinces do not know enough about what's going on in the three provinces to create the political environment that will allow the political leadership to find the right political solutions.
Yes. Please.
So, I'm Mr. Sarwar, the lawyer. I would like to ask you about that when we're talking about the rule of law, but why Thai government not sign for the International Court of Justice, ICJ? So what does both your government during your performance as the Prime Minister and this government also? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, a number of countries are still not yet party to the ICC, I think, and there are a number of, actually the Democrat government back in 2000 began the process, but there are still a number of reservations that we have. But there is still, certainly during the previous government, ongoing talks with representatives from the court to see how we can perhaps work together and move ahead towards perhaps becoming party or to the full ratification of the treaty.
Thank you for the question. Only last one, okay? Last one. Because as far as this time is concerned, we have to be very straightforward.
Yes, Your Excellency, thank you very much for your interesting speech. I'm working at the Embassy of Sweden, and the international community is following, of course, the process of reconciliation very closely, and also the process of democratization. Arguably, one of the bigger challenges is the limitation to the political rights in Thailand. We followed, together with other embassies, the trial and conviction and imprisonment of Kun Ampon, also known as Uncle SMS in the media. I think there are challenges, there might be challenges to the, that also have implications for the reconciliation and democratization process. How do you see the political rights in Thailand? Is there a need for reforms, and in which case, which reforms?
On paper, since 1997, we have, I think, perhaps one of the most progressive constitutions as far as guaranteeing the rights of people are concerned. Where we have fallen short, of course, is to implement and enforce that, particularly enforce it according to the spirit of what is written in the Constitution. You know, we now have a web of organizations from the Constitutional Court, the Admin Court, the Human Rights Commission, and I could go on. And yet, the progress that we make in terms of enforcing the law in guaranteeing people's rights continue to be a problem. And there has to be a fundamental change more in the attitude of people who work in government agencies, particularly law enforcement agencies, which will actually make these rights truly effective. There continues to be discrimination. There continues to be limitations as far as basic rights exercised by people in any democracy. You know, I'm in the opposition now. I know what's going on as far as interference with the media is concerned, in terms of intimidation now to people who donate to opposition parties, in terms of other actions being taken by various departments. We need to overcome that, and we need to make sure that you know, democracy is implemented in spirit, and not just being there with the right principles on paper.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency, for a wonderful speech. Can we all give him a round of applause? Our next speakers, Dr. Mahathir Bin Mohamad, the former Malaysian Prime Minister, an honorary president of Badana Leadership Foundations. Dr. Mahathir Bin Mohamad was the fourth Prime Minister of Malaysia. He held the post for 22 years, from 1981 to 2003, making him Malaysia's longest-serving Prime Minister. His political career spanned almost 40 years. Dr. Mahathir Mohamad opened the country to foreign investment, reformed taxation, reduced trade barriers, the privatization of numerous state-owned enterprises. Besides creating a world-class physical infrastructures, he also sought to bridge Malaysians' ethnic divides by increasing general prosperity. Under Dr. Mahathir's leadership, Malaysia developed into one of the most prosperous, dynamic economy in Southeast Asia, with a burgeoning industrial sector, an expanding middle class, and enhanced quality of life. Malaysia also played a more active role in the international arena, acting as the voice of developing nations in Asia, Africa, always with one eye on the future. Dr. Mahathir Mohamad unveiled Vision 2020 in 1991, a blueprint for Malaysian journey to becoming a developed economy and measured democracy by the year 2020. May I call upon the privilege of Excellency Dr. Mahathir to the stage. Please welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be on you, and very good morning to everyone. His Excellency, the former Prime Minister of Thailand, Mr. Abhisit Vijaydiva, the President of the Prince of Songkhla University, members of the academic staff, guests, students, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to the university for this invitation to talk on a subject that is of great concern to all of us about ASEAN and the need to deal with ASEAN politics, to resolve conflicts, and also to ensure peace in the ASEAN countries. Malaysia, as you know, was under British rule for quite a long time. And the British were tasked with the defense of the country and the management of foreign affairs. And so in 1957, when Malaysia became independent, we had to take over these subjects, particularly with regard to foreign relations. And almost immediately, we found it very difficult to handle because there were countries in the ASEAN region which were opposed to us. Principally, it was Indonesia and also the Philippines. We also had problems, some minor issues with Thailand and with other countries, with Brunei, for example. So we had to deal with these things from a very inexperienced Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it became very difficult for us. Indonesia, for example, launched Indonesian confrontation against Malaysia. And that involves some military activities. The Philippines claim the state of Sabah, also known as British North Borneo before, as their territory, and threatened, of course, to work with Indonesia in order to dismantle Malaysia. But we felt that we were not in a position to defend the country militarily. Therefore, we seek to settle these problems by other means. And at that stage, there were people who thought that there should be some kind of organization in Southeast Asia which would help deal with conflicts between the nations of Southeast Asia. And so it was that 3 countries came together and set up what was initially known as ASA, Association of Southeast Asia. And ASA consisted of Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. With the setting up of this organization, it became possible for the leaders to meet, to try and resolve conflicts between them. When Indonesian confrontation ended in 1965, ASA was expanded to include Singapore and Brunei. It was a 5-member organization founded not because of a need to have economic cooperation. A lot of people seem to think that this is a kind of economic community such as the European Economic Community. At that time, there was no European Union. there was only the EEC, or European Economic Community, which itself started as something else. So, people thought that ASEAN is like the economic community of Europe. But ASEAN was started as a means to resolve conflicts between neighbors. Now, every country will have conflicts within neighbors. There will be overlapping claims, there will be a lot of breaches of rights, there will be movements of people. All these things tend to create conflicts between nations. And therefore, when ASEAN was set up, it made it possible for the leaders of ASEAN to come together and to discuss the problems faced by the group and to seek solution to a peaceful solution to the relationship between the countries of ASEAN. Malaysia appears to be right in the middle of this group. We had borders with Thailand, we had borders with Brunei, with Singapore, with Indonesia, and with the Philippines. And we had problems with all of them. With Thailand, there was an overlapping claim in the South China Sea, actually, just below the Gulf of Thailand, where there is a triangular piece of sea which was claimed by Malaysia and also claimed by Thailand. Well, we could have gone to war with Thailand, but I don't think the leaders at that time cherished fighting each other. So they decided, or rather the Malaysian Prime Minister and the Thai Prime Minister decided that they should resolve this problem peacefully. And so it was that they reached agreement that whatever is produced in that triangular piece of sea should be shared equally between Thailand and Malaysia. Now, this is something that lots of people don't appreciate. But when you solve a problem without having to go to war, you have done something very unusual and very great. So the problem with Thailand was resolved because we decided, Thailand and Malaysia decided that we should share the gas that is being produced in this area. And indeed, we have produced gas in this area, and we are sharing the gas 50-50 at the moment. Then we had conflicts with Indonesia. With Indonesia, there was a claim on two very beautiful islands. These islands were regarded by Jacques Cousteau as among the most beautiful islands in the world. There are lots of marine lives there, and lots of people want to go there and see or swim or dive in this area. Now, Indonesia claims that it is Indonesian, these two islands are Indonesian islands, and we claim that we have people who have been living there all the time. They have coconut trees on these islands. We could not resolve these claims by both countries through negotiation as we did with Thailand. It went on for a very long time, but eventually both countries decided that we should go to the international court and ask the international court to decide who owns the island. Of course, in order to do this, both sides must agree to go to the international court, and both sides must undertake to accept whatever finding is made by the international court. As it turned out, the international court decided that these two islands belong to Malaysia. Of course, Indonesia is very disappointed, but they have given a commitment that they will accept the findings of the International Court. Supposing we had gone to war, a lot of people, a lot of things would be destroyed, people would be killed, and in the end, somebody would take over these islands, and there will always be continuous conflict because the losers would continue to try and get back the islands. But by going to the International Court and accepting the findings of the International Court, we avoid violent conflicts. We avoid going to war with each other, killing people, and the like. Then we have a piece of rock, a small rock that juts out into the sea between Singapore and Malaysia. There is a lighthouse there. The lighthouse was built by the British. It was operated from Singapore, but actually we believe that there are several lighthouses operated from Singapore but are Malaysian. The islands belong to Malaysia. So we claim that this rock belongs to Malaysia. And the argument, the haggling, the negotiation went on for years and years. And then it was decided that we should go to the International Court again. Both sides gave the agreed that we should go to the International Court and gave the undertaking that we would accept whatever findings made by the International Court. Of course, we have to have our lawyers going there to present our cases, and so did the Singaporeans. But in the end, the International Court made a wrong decision. They awarded these rocks to Singapore. But what to do? We cannot go back on our words. We had said that whatever findings made by the International Court, we will accept. So now the rocks belong to Singapore. Although two other rocks further away from Malaysia, but nearer Singapore, there was no decision made. So we can claim those two rocks. So even rocks can create problems for nations. They might go to war against each other just for the rocks. But fortunately, the two countries, Malaysia and Singapore, decided that we would go to the International Court and decide to accept the findings of the International Court. So the problem is over. We can now, be very friendly with Singapore, and Singapore can be very friendly with us because we don't have this thing in the background all the time. Then there is this problem with Brunei. Brunei offshore is very rich in oil, and we decided, or we claim, that a large part of the sea there belonged to Malaysia. And so we sent in our ships there, and we started drilling for oil, and the Bruneians sent in their warships. So there could have been a war between Brunei and Malaysia. Brunei has a population of 250,000. Malaysia has a population of 28 million. Not as big as Thailand, but still by comparison, Brunei is quite small. We could have gone to war with them. We could have just ignored their claim and shoot at their ships, should their warships go into that area. But the Malaysian leaders at that time decided that it was not worthwhile fighting over this claim. We decided that through negotiation, we decided that, well, the sea belongs to Brunei. Malaysia considered that the sea belongs to Brunei, and but the exploitation of resources should be done together with a Malaysian company, namely Petronas. And this arrangement worked quite well, and so the problem has been resolved. So ASEAN has been able to bring us together to resolve conflicts between us in a very peaceful manner. So some people say, well, ASEAN has not done very much, but I dispute that, because I find that since the establishment of ASEAN, the leaders have met frequently with each other. We know each other by first names, and we can practically ring up each other and say, look, let's solve this problem, or whatever small problem that we may have between us could be resolved through negotiation, through personal contacts. Currently, you know, there is a conflict between Japan and China over one small island. And it's also a conflict between Japan and Korea. And they refuse to negotiate or anything. They say this is their island, and they objected strongly to the Japanese claim. And the Japanese also objected strongly to the Chinese claim or the Korean claim. And they refused to go to the World Court. I think the time has come for us to forget about violent struggles in order to possess land or to take over land that we claim to be ours. We have set up the United Nations ostensibly in order to avoid wars between nations, in order to have problems of conflicts between nations resolved through negotiation, arbitration, or through a court of law. But we ignore this provision. We still refuse to go to a court of law. I think that the ASEAN solution of resolving conflicts between neighbors should be cited as examples of how we avoid violence and confrontations. Instead, we prepare our minds that we may lose on our claim, but still we need to resolve this claim through peaceful means by either negotiating or arbitration, or we go to an international court of law and leave it to them, to the court, to decide who owns what. I think this is a much more civilized way of dealing with conflicts between nations. And this alone makes ASEAN very relevant and a good example for the rest of the world. There are many other groupings of countries in the world, but I think if you think carefully, you will agree that ASEAN is the most successful groupings that is to be found among neighbors in the world. We have met very frequently. Other countries like to have dialogues with us. We have dialogue partners with the major powers, and with the European Union, with America, with India, and with many other countries, in order to promote good relations and in order to promote our economic relations with these other countries. ASEAN, I think, is a good example for a lot of people on how to deal with conflicts between neighbors, how to bring about peace within the region, and how to develop the country. But of course, today we are having a problem because of the claim by China over the Spratly Islands. Malaysia claims some of the islands in the Spratly group, so does the Philippines, so does Brunei, and I think Vietnam also is involved. These are all members of the ASEAN group, and they are faced with this problem of China making claims on a number of islands which belong to the ASEAN countries. What do we do? Do we go to war with China? I don't think we should take on China even the US will hesitate to take on China. Of course, you know, there are so many Chinese. You can kill a few millions of them, or a few 100 millions, they will still be around. So I don't think confrontation is the answer. We need to negotiate with China. We need to present a united front and to have to resolve this claim through peaceful means. We should point out to China that this is how we resolve our conflicts in the ASEAN region. We negotiate, we go for arbitration, or we go to a court of law. Of course, China doesn't want to go to a court of law because China claims that the South China Sea, because it is named China Sea, belongs to China. And of course, the Indian Ocean belongs to the Indians. Which explains why Sukarno decided to call the Indonesian island, the Indian Ocean, the Indonesian Ocean. So we can claim oceans for ourselves and go to war and kill people, and in the end, you solve nothing. You solve nothing. See, so leaders must be aware of the dangers of escalating conflicts through confrontations. If there is a claim, overlapping claim, we should sit down and study the matter closely to find out the validity of the claims, of our claims and their claims. And if we cannot negotiate with them, then we should actually go to a court of law. The international court set up by the United Nations is the right forum, the right court to go to resolve conflicts. And the minds of leaders must be attuned to this. War is not something that we should resort to. Of course, initially, the Indonesian confrontation was about using violence in order to resolve their problem with Malaysia. But since then, in the ASEAN region, we have not resorted to war. We have, in fact, tried to help each other resolve even conflicts within their countries. Malaysia, at the moment, is trying to help resolve the problem in southern Philippines. But, of course, it's not an easy matter. Still, we have not been able to resolve these things completely. But if you look at these things and these violent upheavals against the governments and all that, in the end, they gain nothing. We are looking at what happens in the Middle East, for example. There is this conflict between the Arabs and the Israelis. It is not about re-establishing countries or the claims of Israel to be recognized. It's just a question of revenge. You kill my people, I'll kill your people. And when I kill your people, you will say, we will kill your people. And it goes on for years and years. Not a very civilized way of dealing with a problem. Far better if we decide to sit around a table and discuss and maybe resolve the issue. Failing that, we should ask for arbitration by a neutral body, or we should go to a court of law. But it is sometimes difficult to persuade people to resort to peaceful means. They prefer violence, but violence, as far as we can see, has not resulted in any gains for anybody. For example, the First World War and the Second World War were fought in order to end all wars. These were great wars, fought in order to put an end to warring as a means of solving conflicts between nations. But as you know, we are still seeing people fighting wars, invading countries, and killing a lot of people, starving people, applying sanctions and hoping people would die from lack of food and medicine and all that. That is a very primitive way of solving a conflict. In the past, I think it's excusable. When people were more primitive, their leaders would resort to fighting because that's the only way they know about resolving conflicts. But the damage they caused in those days was very minimal. They used bows and arrows and spears and probably use horses and very simple slings. And the damage done is very minimal. One arrow would probably kill one person. So even if they fight, the number of people killed would be minimal, and probably those people who are killed would be soldiers fighting each other. But today's wars involve the whole country, the public, the people, the innocent people who were not involved at all in the conflict. When you drop a bomb, well, now they have intelligent bombs, but I think the intelligent bombs which are dropped did not find enough time to determine who and who is a target. So you get blown to pieces for no very good reason. And today we have the capacity of destroying this whole world by using nuclear weapons. The big nuclear powers have got, each of them about 10,000 nuclear warheads. Each one of them can actually wipe out humanity. That is something that I think we should not contemplate even, that we should destroy all these warheads, because if you use them, you are going to do harm to yourself also, because you cannot stop the radiated dust and all that from floating into your own country if you go to war using nuclear weapons. But even if you don't use nuclear weapons, we find that modern weapons are so sophisticated that their capacity to kill and damage is horrendous. Whole countries can be destroyed, reduced to deserts by dropping conventional weapons. Now, of course, they have come up with the unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV. So the man who's fighting a war need not fly the plane. He can stay at home, have a glass of beer, and push some buttons and manipulate some radio control instrument, and the UAV will then fly over the other country, drop bombs or fire rockets, and kill a lot of people. So the tendency, the temptation to go to war where you will not be hurt, but other people will be hurt, is very great. These are the latest inventions. And as time goes on, they are going to come up with even more weapons. I'm very happy that none of the ASEAN countries have nuclear weapons. Of course, they don't have bombs, but you can buy these depleted uranium weapons, which are equally radioactive. So I hope that in ASEAN, this should be banned. We cannot ban it. We tried to ban the area of ban having weapons, nuclear weapons, in this area. We had what we call the I forgot already, but this is an ASEAN project, that there should be no nuclear weapons in the area at all. But of course, people who have these big ships with nuclear weapons, they pass through the Straits of Malacca, and we are not good enough to try and stop them. Because if our boats try to stop these huge aircraft carriers and all that, probably the boats will be sunk not by shooting, merely by crashing through them. So it is something that we cannot do. But I think the world, the people should come to their senses and try and avoid wars. And here, the model presented by ASEAN is very good, because in the ASEAN region, we no longer fight wars with each other. We have problems. It's not possible to be conflict-free between neighbors. Always there'll be some problems. Sometimes people from one country moves into another country. We are having a problem today with Rohingyas, for example, because of their unhappiness living in Myanmar. They have come to Malaysia as refugees. We want to send them back, but Myanmar says they are not Myanmar people. They are not our nationals, so we will not accept them. So we have a lot of stateless people in Malaysia. This can be a source of conflict between Malaysia and Myanmar. But we hope that we can somehow resolve these things through negotiation with Myanmar. And I think the whole of ASEAN should take up this matter, because we cannot accept people being declared as non-nationals and infiltrating into our countries. So Myanmar should take the model, the example of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Malaysia and Brunei, etc. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention about our conflict with the Philippines. That has not been resolved. Philippines still claims North Borneo or Sabah as a part of the Philippines. But that's all right. They can continue claiming it. But we have good relations with them. We have our diplomats there, and they have their diplomats in Malaysia. We have diplomatic relations. If we have a problem, we talk with each other, but they continue to maintain their claim on Sabah. But they have not sent any military force to take over Sabah. So that's all right. We can make a claim. We can make a claim over other countries also, as long as we don't go and fight against them. But by and large, ASEAN has brought about peace in this region. And we should be very thankful that the leaders of ASEAN have always tried to avoid violent conflicts between them. If they have a problem, they will talk to each other, they will negotiate, and if they cannot resolve, they can always go to the World Court. I think Thailand has not signed, you have not accepted yet the World Court, but that's all right, because we were able to talk to each other and resolve our problem without having to go to the World Court. So conflict resolution can be violent, but that is not the best choice. It is far better if we resolve conflicts through negotiation, arbitration, or through a court of law. If we can do that, then I think we'll continue to have a very strong ASEAN, which works together with each other in the economic field and even in the political field, help each other to maintain peace and provide a model to the rest of the world on how to resolve conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for such an insightful and eloquent speech. So now, time for Q&A. Any questions? Yes, please. Can you please identify yourself
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Excellency. My name is Achara from Bangkok Post. It's a great honor to listen to two prime ministers, but I would like to ask two questions. First, since you mentioned already the South China Sea dispute, and which the US and China seem to be also playing some role here in the region, so it's warming up now. So could you be more precise on what should be done in terms of the ASEAN members, because some may take a little bit side on the US, some might be feel uncomfortable with that. And secondly, since this is a forum for the Southern issue, so actually I would like to ask the former Thai Prime Minister too, whether you see this conflict for decades, and you were a leader yourself, so do you see any better, or you still see the struggling in finding some solutions? Thank you.
Well, firstly, of course, it was disappointing that the foreign ministers of the ASEAN countries could not reach agreement on how to deal with the claims or the attitude of China over its claim to the South China Seas. But I think we should continue to talk among ourselves and to show that this is the best way. We don't want to have a war in our region. Of course, America feels that by threatening China, China would withdraw. I don't think China would do that, because for the Chinese, face is very important. You know, if you shame the Chinese, they might become very aggressive. So let's not have a confrontation. When you bring in America, America believes in military strength. If there is a conflict, go to war. If there is no reason to go to war, invent a reason. That's what happened with Iraq. So they love war, and they have the best weapons. They have the best weapons in the world. But I think we should try and persuade the Philippines that let's not bring in these people into the area. Let ASEAN try and resolve this problem with China by itself. That ASEAN should do the negotiation. I don't think China loves war as much as, other people. I cannot mention who. But, you know, China has found that you don't have to conquer countries. You can conquer the countries by producing cheap products and pushing out the other countries' products off the shelf. You see, actually China has conquered the world now. Economically, it has conquered the world. And you can imagine Europe hoping to get some help from China. Not so long ago, Europe was very, looks down upon China as a very backward country. But now China has become a very rich country. People are looking at China because it has so much money, more even than the Arab people. So we cannot just say, wish that China would disappear. It's going to be there. It's been there for 2,000 over years, 4,000 over years. We have had relation, Malaysia had relation with China for 1,800 years. Initially collecting from the forest some products to exchange for silk and lacquer ware produced by China. China did not conquer us. We had the Portuguese come to Malacca in 1509. 2 years later, they sent a fleet with an armed force, and they conquered Malacca. So I think China is a little bit more reasonable than the Portuguese, because the Portuguese came 2 years and they conquered us. But we traded with China for years, for centuries. They never conquered us. they did send Cheng Ho to Malaysia. He could easily conquer Malaysia, but he didn't. So I think China is reasonable. Let's talk with them together. You see, ASEAN should talk together. That's my view. Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Abhisit.
Please bring the microphone at the front.
I'll also add some thoughts on the South China Seas issue, because Thailand was chair of ASEAN back in 2009, and this we knew was a sensitive issue, and we were able to have internal discussions on the matter. And I think in recent times the problem has been that this problem now gets discussed with the US, with China coming in, and also now there appears to be a split among ASEAN countries. I think what the role of ASEAN should be is to separate the issue of claims from the safe passage of the sea. And it's the latter issue that ASEAN needs to take responsibility for, to make sure that there continues to be peace in the region. Whereas the claimants will have to work out among themselves how best they want to resolve the conflicts without, of course, going to war. And that should be done among the claimants. So I think if we separate these two issues out, and ASEAN knows the scope of its own responsibility, and then in discussing with its dialogue partners, that should be the way forward. Now, as far as the southern situation is concerned, I mentioned in my talk that we had seen some progress being made, the ability to lift martial law, state of emergency in selected areas, talks and dialogue beginning, the invitation for participation in groups, but it has to be continued. And I think what will determine whether we make further progress is whether there is continuity and commitment from the government on these policies. We have offered our services. We've said I've talked to the President of Parliament that our MPs, myself, will be willing to sit down and discuss with the Prime Minister in Parliament or in whatever forum she feels is appropriate to contribute our thoughts. And we hope that if we have that opportunity, we're still waiting for a response. If we have that opportunity, we'll urge the government to make clear commitments and continue on this approach.
Thank you. Maybe we still have time for our last questions. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum, His Excellency Tun. I'm Kari Anwar bin Khalid from Malaysia Relief Agency, and we have been working with the CSO Council in southern Thailand to resolve the conflict. My question to Tun is, we are listening about non-interference policy of ASEAN countries, among the ASEAN members. So my question is, what about regarding the southern conflict? Is the ASEAN solution for this conflict? Or any CSO council or CSO network in South Asia that's working towards this conflict, to resolve the conflict in southern region, in Thai southern region? Thank you.
Can you repeat it again?
Okay. There is non-interference policy in ASEAN countries, among ASEAN members. So my question is, whether ASEAN want to take the initiative to have a dialogue or negotiation on the southern conflict in Thailand. And the second one, it says CSO network in Southeast Asia. What we are doing now is to have a network where we can discuss and to resolve the conflict. What is the support of the ASEAN countries on this matter? Thank you.
ASEAN conflict in southern Thailand?
Southern Thailand, yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, firstly, I think it is an internal problem. Normally, in such a situation, we don't interfere. ASEAN does not interfere unless we are invited by Thailand itself to help resolve the conflict. I have had discussion with some of these people and tried to persuade them to resolve their conflict peacefully. That's about as far as I could go. In the case of southern Philippines, the Philippines government invited Malaysia to help resolve this problem in the southern Philippines. Then we went in. It's not that, well, we did not represent ASEAN, but because the Philippines invited Malaysia especially, then we should help them if we can. But generally, it is not wise to interfere in the internal affairs of member countries.
Yes, sir. What about the CSO? I mean, the CSO network. We are not interfering in the ASEAN matters, you know. But anyway, we had to solve the problems. As Mr. Ibi said, Mr. Ibi said, told us just now that we really need a mediator or third parties to work out on this issue. Now we cannot just left to the insurgents group or to the government to resolve the issue. So if there any way that we can go towards the way that we can solve the problem for the lasting peace in southern Thailand.
You mean the roles of CSOs?
Yeah, CSO.
What is it? Can you...
The roles of CSOs in solving the conflict of southern Thailand. What is
civil society organizations, sir. CSO.
Civil society organizations.
NGOs.
The role of CSO in solving the conflict of southern Thailand.
CSO?
Yes.
Civil societies organization or NGOs.
Well, actually, I'm no longer the Prime Minister of Malaysia. So I don't know what the role would be. That might be recommended by the Prime Minister, present Prime Minister of Malaysia. I'm glad I'm no longer. Sorry to disappoint you. Thank you.
I think this session has come to... Oh.
With your permission, just to clarify the comments I made. First of all, I think the former Prime Minister is absolutely right that it isn't wise for other members to interfere with internal matters of other members. Having said that, I said in my talk that the country that faces problems can seek cooperation, can seek maybe help of some form, and I can say that during the former Prime Minister's time there were consultations about the need to cooperate as far as intelligence is concerned and so on. That's something that can be done. In terms of acting as a role of facilitator, mediator, they can be helpful in certain situations, but it is up to the government to decide. Now, for Thailand, I mentioned earlier, this is a domestic problem. We still have to go through a stage of trust building, of identifying the parties concerned, because as you know, the situation here, when there are incidents, nobody claims responsibilities and so on. So it's a different situation from other areas. And as far as CSO is concerned, I said clearly, and also during my administration, that we do invite CSOs to participate, to help us provide information, maybe to talk to groups that trust these organizations more than the government and provide feedback to us. So they can certainly play a role.
Thank you. I think the session has come to the end. It is actually a very rare opportunities to have the two former Prime Ministers of the countries at the same time. So can we all give them a big round of applause? Now I turn the stage to Dr. Badi.
Thank you very much for such a provocative and insightful speeches made by our former Prime Ministers of Malaysia and Thailand. So now I would like to call upon the President of Prince of Songkhla University, Associate Professor Dr. Chusak Lim Sakun, to present a token of appreciation to His Excellency Tun Dr. Mahathir Bin Mohamad. Please proceed to the stage. You can see that the drawing was made by one of our PSU's fine art instructor teaching at the Faculty of Fine and Applied Arts faculty, PSU Patani. Its title is Becoming a Scapegoat. The concept of this painting is that it reflects the image of cultural diversity and peaceful coexistence. The unrest situation in the three border provinces of Thailand, it inspired the artist to create this symbolic artistic work of a goat. For the artist, the goat is a symbol of innocent people that one day become victims of scapegoating due to the unrest situation in the region. Becoming the scapegoat into a disaster area causes even more problems, which are difficult to be solved. Now, may I kindly call upon His Excellency Apisit Vechachiwa, former Prime Minister of Thailand, to receive a token of appreciation from the President of Prince of Songkhla University. The painting also was made by one of our PSU fine arts lecturer. The title of painting is Freedom. As you may know, pigeons symbolize peace. If the freedom is curtains, is blocked, it can refer to an incomplete drawing of the bird. It also reflects some aspects of a society filled with unrest incidents. The strongest is the survivors, but the direct impact of the unrest situations relies on the innocent people. So thank you very much indeed. Now we may take a group photo session. Thank you very much indeed, His Excellencies. Now the history of PSU will record